What if I told you a vault locked for 30 years could change everything you thought you knew about Sammy Davis Jr.? For decades, fans believed his biggest secrets were buried with him. His scandals, his treasures, his truth. But here's the twist. When the vault was finally opened, it wasn't just jewelry and old memorabilia inside. I've uncovered details from people who were there, and what they saw left even the FBI stunned. In this video, I'm breaking down exactly what was hidden away, why it stayed locked for so long, and how its contents could rewrite Sammy's story forever. What if I told you the most explosive chapter of Sammy Davis Jr.'s life didn't come out until 30 years after his death? For decades, fans believed his secrets died with him. His scandals, his treasures, his truth. But hidden deep inside a Burbank warehouse was a locked storage unit, rented under a fake name, paid for in cash every single month until the day he died. No one touched it. No one even knew it was there. For 3 decades, it sat in silence until someone stopped paying the bill. And that's when everything unraveled. When investigators finally pried it open, they expected maybe an old trumpet, some dusty costumes, or forgotten memorabilia. But here's where it gets wild. What they found inside made even seasoned law enforcement freeze. Letters revealing the true identity of his real mother. Secret tapes of private conversations that could destroy reputations. Evidence about what really happened between Sammy and Hollywood icon Kim Novak in 1958. The romance that nearly got him killed. Sammy had documented everything, from scandalous encounters to the kind of personal confession stars would rather burn than keep. But listen to this. The whole thing was almost lost forever. The stash had been moved there just 2 weeks after an auction of his belongings, using stolen ID and cash to avoid the IRS. The plan? Keep paying and keep it hidden. But when one payment slipped, the vault's secrets spilled into the open. For 30 years, the world thought they knew Sammy Davis Jr.'s story. The truth? It had been locked away all along, waiting to rewrite his legacy in the most shocking way possible. Imagine being born into the spotlight before you could even walk. That was Sammy Davis Jr.'s reality. He entered the world on December 8, 1925, in Harlem, New York, the son of 2 vaudeville performers, Sammy Davis Sr. and Elvira Sanchez. Show business wasn't just in his blood, it was his crib. But there was a secret woven into his birth certificate that the world wouldn't learn for decades. His mother was Cuban. In an era when anti-Cuban and anti-immigrant sentiment ran high in America, revealing those roots could have crushed his career before it began. The family kept it quiet. Even as a newborn, Sammy's life was already shaped by racism and the need to hide pieces of who he really was. Harlem in the late 1920s was alive with music, laughter, and the electric energy of the Harlem Renaissance. But while other kids played stickball in the streets, Sammy's playground was the stage. By age 2, he was already performing with the Will Maston Trio, the act led by his father and their friend Will Maston. He didn't have dolls or trucks. He had tap shoes and a microphone. Most toddlers learn to color inside the lines. Sammy was learning how to stop a crowd in its tracks. But here's where it gets interesting. That early fame came at a price. While other kids were learning their ABCs in school, Sammy was learning how to dodge prejudice on the road. Every city brought new audiences, but also the sting of whites-only signs and the cold rejection of segregation. It was exhausting, but it fueled something in him, a fire to break through those barriers, no matter how high they were built. That hunger to be seen for his talent, not his skin color, started here. And it was just the beginning of a fight he'd wage his whole life. At 18 years old, Sammy Davis Jr. should have been on top of the world. He was barely 5'6", weighed just 120 pounds, but he could command a stage like no one else. Then, in 1943, his life took a sharp turn. The U.S. Army drafted him into one of its first integrated units, a move that sounded progressive on paper, but in reality, it dropped him straight into a war zone of hate without bullets. The very first soldier he met greeted him with a racial slur. It was a brutal wake-up call. In uniform, his talent meant nothing. The abuse was relentless. White soldiers kidnapped him, painted his skin white from head to toe, and mocked him for hours. They tricked him into drinking beer laced with urine. They broke his nose 3 times. Some nights, they urinated on him before forcing him on stage, slurs scrawled across his forehead. One freezing night, they tied him to a tree and left him there, a chilling reminder of the racial terror that had haunted America for generations. The army didn't protect him. It looked the other way. But here's the twist. What should have broken him ended up becoming his weapon. When Sammy joined the Army's entertainment unit, everything changed. On stage, even the men who despised him couldn't resist clapping. His dancing, his singing, his jokes, they disarmed the hate, even if only for minutes at a time. That applause became his armor. It was in those barracks and makeshift theaters that Sammy realized something powerful. Talent could open doors that prejudice tried to lock. And when the war ended, he was ready to kick those doors wide open. When Sammy Davis Jr. returned from the Army in 1951, he wasn't just a young entertainer. He was a survivor with something to prove. His big break came at Ciro's, one of the most glamorous nightclubs on Sunset Boulevard. As part of the Will Maston Trio, he opened for Janice Page, and the room was electric. But the real turning point came after the Academy Awards that same year, when Hollywood royalty, Humphrey Bogart, Marilyn Monroe, Judy Garland, packed into Ciro's to see what all the buzz was about. Sammy didn't just perform, he detonated. His mix of singing, dancing, impressions, and comedy left the crowd stunned. Overnight, the Will Maston Trio became the hottest ticket in town. But here's where fate threw a brutal curveball. Just 3 years later, in November 1954, Sammy was driving his Cadillac from Las Vegas to Los Angeles when another car suddenly swerved into his lane. The crash slammed him into the steering wheel, the horn button shattering into his left eye. The injury was permanent. Most people thought his career was finished. Instead, Sammy made an unthinkable choice. 8 weeks later, wearing an eye patch, he walked back onto the Ciro's stage. The audience roared. That accident didn't just cost him an eye. It led him to Judaism. While recovering, he studied Jewish history and saw parallels to his own struggles. Converting wasn't just a spiritual choice, it was a statement. Being black and Jewish in 1950s America meant living with 2 layers of prejudice, and he embraced both identities with pride. The world had tried to slow him down, but all it did was sharpen his drive. By the late 1950s, Sammy Davis Jr. was no longer the kid in the background. He was headlining shows in the entertainment capital of the world. Las Vegas glittered with neon, but behind the lights was a harsh truth. Black performers could sing for sold-out crowds, yet be forced to sleep in rundown motels on the other side of town. Sammy could pack the Sands Hotel every night, but he wasn't allowed to stay there, eat in its restaurants, or even walk through the front doors as a guest. Here's where it gets interesting. Sammy didn't just accept it. He fought back, using his star power and his friendship with the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and others to force change. When Frank found out about the hotel's discrimination, he threatened to pull his performances unless Sammy was treated like the headliner he was. Slowly, the walls began to crack. By the early 1960s, Sammy was not only earning $25,000 a week at the Sands, but also became the first black entertainer to be offered free room and board at the Frontier Hotel. But Sammy wasn't just chasing personal victories. He pushed for a complete end to segregation in Vegas, and by 1971, hotels officially dropped their discriminatory policies. His fight wasn't quiet, and it wasn't easy, but it changed the face of the city forever. The same casinos that once kept him out would later dim their lights in his honor when he died. Sammy didn't just perform in Las Vegas, he rewrote its rules. In the late 1950s, Sammy Davis Jr. fell for one of Hollywood's most glamorous women, Kim Novak. She was Columbia Pictures' Golden Girl, and he was the hottest black entertainer in America. In a time when interracial relationships were dangerous, their romance was pure dynamite. They tried to keep it hidden, secret getaways, meetings in Malibu, ducking under blankets in cars. But Hollywood gossip moved faster than they could. Then it happened. In January 1958, a gossip column falsely announced they were engaged. The story hit the press like wildfire, and panic spread through the studios. Columbia's powerful boss, Harry Cohn, had deep mob connections, and he saw Sammy as a threat to Novak's image and to the studio's profits. The next part feels like it came straight from a gangster movie. Mobsters kidnapped Sammy, told him to end things with Kim, and warned that if he didn't, he'd lose his remaining eye or worse. Even Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana reportedly admitted he couldn't protect Sammy this time. 3 days later, Sammy married singer Lorraine White, a sham marriage meant to silence the scandal. He paid her up to $25,000, but the night was so tense he nearly had a breakdown. Within months, the marriage was over. The romance with Kim was dead, but the scars were permanent. It was a chilling reminder that in 1950s America, love could be a life-or-death gamble if you crossed the racial line. And Sammy had just paid the ultimate emotional price. If Sammy Davis Jr.'s relationship with Kim Novak was dangerous, his next great love would be a full-on declaration of war against America's racial taboos. In 1960, Sammy married Swedish-born actress May Britt. She was white, blonde, and a rising Hollywood star, and their wedding came at a time when interracial marriage was still illegal in 31 states. A Gallup poll showed only 4% of Americans approved. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Their plan to wed at Temple Israel of Hollywood collapsed after bomb threats poured in. They moved the ceremony to Sammy's Hollywood Hills home, with Frank Sinatra and Peter Lawford as witnesses. Both Sammy and May converted to Judaism, making them one of the most visible Black Jewish interracial couples in the world. But here's where the cruelty hit hardest. Swastikas were painted on their property, strangers shouted slurs at them in public, and May's contract with 20th Century Fox was terminated overnight. The hate didn't stop after their daughter Tracy was born in 1961, or after they adopted 2 sons. Racist graffiti defaced their cars, and their children faced prejudice outside the protective bubble of home. Behind the glamour, the marriage was under siege, not just from public hostility, but from the pressures of Sammy's relentless touring and his growing appetite for excess. In 1968, after 8 years together, May filed for divorce, citing extreme cruelty and mental suffering. Sammy's affair with singer Lola Falana was the breaking point. It wasn't just the end of marriage. It was the collapse of one of Hollywood's boldest challenges to America's racial boundaries. By the 1970s, Sammy Davis Jr. was still dazzling audiences on stage, but behind closed doors, his life was spiraling. His Beverly Hills mansion became infamous for all-night parties where celebrities drank, gambled, and indulged in every excess imaginable. Cocaine, amyl nitrite, and alcohol became part of his daily routine. Rumors of wife-swapping and wild orgies swirled through Hollywood gossip circles, and while Sammy laughed them off in public, the chaos in his private life was very real. Here's where it gets worse. Sammy was earning staggering amounts of money, sometimes $185,000 a night, and over his career, he brought in around $50 million. But he spent even faster than he made it. Lavish gifts, bad business investments, shady tax shelters, and a brutal gambling addiction drained his fortune. He could blow $40,000 at the casino in a single night. Unlike his close friend Frank Sinatra, whose debts were often quietly erased, Sammy had to pay every cent. The IRS was always lurking in the shadows, watching his accounts bleed. As the bills piled up, so did the personal wreckage. His marriage to Alto Vice Gore brought moments of stability, but it couldn't contain his addictions. Drugs and alcohol eroded his health and his reputation. Friends said there were nights he could barely make it through a show, and once, he even walked off stage after just one song. By the time the 80s rolled around, the man they call Mr. Show Business was burning through his fortune, his marriages, and his body at the same devastating pace. And the reckoning was coming. In 1987, fans were ecstatic when Sammy Davis Jr. reunited with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin for what was billed as the Rat Pack's Grand Farewell Tour. They called it the ultimate event, and it was unlike anything they had done before. Massive arenas instead of smoking nightclubs, audiences of up to 25,000 instead of few hundred. For a brief moment, it felt like the magic was back. But the years had taken their toll. Dean Martin, then 70, bowed out after just 5 shows, unable to handle the grueling travel. Liza Minnelli stepped in, and Sammy pushed forward, finishing the U.S. run before taking the show to Japan, Australia, and Europe. Then came the blow that would change everything. In August 1989, Sammy began losing his sense of taste. His throat felt raw, his voice weaker. Doctors delivered the devastating news: throat cancer, the result of decades of chain smoking up to 4 packs a day. Surgery to remove his voice box could save his life, but Sammy refused. His voice wasn't just part of his career, it was who he was. Instead, he endured 8 weeks of brutal radiation, clinging to the hope he could keep performing. At first, the treatments seemed to work. The tumor shrank, and he even returned to the stage a few times. But by early 1990, the cancer was back, spreading fast. His weight plummeted to 60 pounds, his voice reduced to a whisper. On May 16, 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. died at home in Beverly Hills at 64. The lights of Las Vegas dimmed in tribute, but behind the tributes, a darker truth was waiting to be revealed, one that would tarnish his final chapter. When Sammy Davis Jr. passed away, the world mourned a legend, but the IRS saw something else: unpaid taxes. Despite earning over $50 million in his lifetime, Sammy died owing more than $7 million to the government, the equivalent of around $13 million today. His estate, valued at roughly $4 million, was swallowed almost entirely by debt. His widow, Alto Weiss, who had co-signed tax returns, inherited the nightmare along with the grief. She was forced to sell their 11,000-square-foot Beverly Hills mansion for $2.7 million, most of which went straight to cover the mortgage. Even small bills, tuxedo rentals, grocery tabs, remained unpaid. Then came the auction. In 1991, over 1,800 people crowded into a Los Angeles venue to bid on more than 500 of Sammy's personal items: gold records, tap shoes, walking sticks, jewelry. His Candyman gold record fetched $4,275, a pair of tap shoes $11,000. The sale brought in $439,000, barely a scratch on the debt. But here's where the story takes a twist worthy of Hollywood. Months later, a storage unit in Burbank, rented under a fake name and paid in cash, was opened by police after the renter stopped paying. Inside were Sammy's long-lost treasures: clothing, instruments, documents, photos, even a jukebox playing the Candyman. They had been hidden there just 2 weeks after the auction, allegedly by an associate of Alto Weiss, trying to keep the IRS from seizing them. The discovery reignited old questions, adding one last shocking chapter to Sammy's turbulent story. If you thought this tale was tragic, you have to see the bizarre story in the video on your screen right now. It will leave you speechless.